Hi everyone, and welcome to my little visualisation work on Australian Parliamentary Entitlements. Now, this was sort of inspired by Bronwyn Bishop's Choppergate expenses, and I went through and pulled out the data when that happened. But since then, I've been working with this visualisation tool called ClickSense, and I thought I'd put it together and show it to you today, and maybe hopefully make it interesting for people who are interested in that, or for people who like pointing fingers. It's not going to be terribly exciting for people who like pointing fingers, and I'll demonstrate to you now exactly why. So for example, let us indeed pick Bronwyn Bishop as the example here. Now, the expenditure in itself was $5,300 in amongst all of this expenditure, and particularly here, $400,000. $5,000 is not much. The journalist who won an award, a Walkley Award, for investigating this, what they would have had to do was they went to the Parliamentary Entitlements reporting site, went on that particular year would have gone to Bronwyn Bishop and found this whole value in Charter, which is on page 10. Would have gone through all that information and seen this. Melbourne to Geelong, Geelong to Melbourne on the same day, and thought, oh, that's a bit odd. Bronwyn Bishop from the North Shore needing a charter from Melbourne to Geelong. She actually then went and found out where Bronwyn Bishop was on that day on Facebook, and these photos are on Facebook from the Clifton Springs Golf Club, and pieced it all together and found it out. So for that level of reporting, you're going to need to go through fairly hard and look at all the details and things, which I assume the major parties do, but I don't have the time to, and I'm sure lots of citizens out there love doing that sort of thing. So let me just start from the start. So this is sort of my overview page here. We've got total costs by parties for year, sort of average costs over here and the overall totals, and finding out that the average cost per member, they're spending about $600,000 over this time period, so over this 3-year reporting period. It's interesting that that much is being spent when they've only got a wage, which is essentially that amount anyway, a bit less depending on what they're doing. But so in this period here, we see that the ALP outspends the LNP a little bit when they were in minority government. And we go over here where the LNP, the coalition, is in power, and we see that they're vastly outspending the ALP here. We've got the Greens, the Nationals, and I've grouped everyone else together under minor parties, all the independents and affiliateds from there. What I'd like to do first is just give you a little comparison between the previous Parliament. So I've got a bookmark here. So what I've done is I've selected those 3 months and people who are members of that particular Parliament. The reason why I do that is because the members are actually allowed to report whenever they want to, so they can report out of time. Also, the reports are on a 6-month lag as well too, so it only goes up to halfway through last year. The current reporting for the rest of 2015 will come out halfway through 2016, which is not overly useful, but there we go. So if we just have a look through here, so this actually drills down. So if we wanted to, say, click on the ALP for this period, or we click on this period, then on the ALP, that will show us all of the members of the party. So let me just go back a bit. Previous Parliament, just to give you an idea of what it was like under the previous Parliament, then we'll go to the next Parliament. So this has a bit more detail in it. This is what I like. So this has got a breakdown of all the individual categories of entitlement. So we have travelling allowances, overseas travel, domestic fares, any other charters, car costs, office facilities, office admin, telecoms, family travel. On the right hand side here I've also got the median household income and the maximum New Start payment. So both of those are scaled as to the number of periods there are. So this is the maximum new start over 3 months, and the median household income for 3 months. Sorry, for 3 periods, which is 18 months. What? I'm sure you're jumping out at me, going, "What is this? How come the average cost for each member is $200,000 worth of office admin and office facilities? This is ridiculous." Well, it's basically when the Bronwyn Bishop thing was coming up, I was reading between the lines and saying that this is essentially sort of a side fund for them to use in advertising around elections and that sort of thing, and that members are kind of encouraged to put aside money to help out other people who aren't in Parliament, because $200,000 seems a bit too much to spend on photocopy paper and office admin. It's a bit rough. You'll see that the ALP here spent a lot on overseas travel. I'll get to that in a second, why exactly that is. The other exciting ones here is the Nationals, like chartering in the previous Parliament. I'll also address that later with my educated guess as to why that is. But again, they like cars as well too, so they might like to explain that better, but I've got a good idea why. So this is the total cost by party. No, so not just the average cost per member, but the overall cost. So you can see that in terms of overseas travel, the ALP really smacked it in under Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd. They both flew around about the same amount. And the real difference here is a bit difference in the office expenditures and office admin. I'm going to skip past this one and go straight to the worst. So this is the total amount claimed by each member for the time period allocated. And you see number one here is Bob Carr. It's Bob Carr here, and that explains the previous one with the overseas travel, because Bob Carr is essentially responsible for most of it. He tended to fly around a lot. You see, he spent $2 million here compared to, say, the leader at the time, Julia Gillard, who spent $1.3 million total, the Prime Minister. So, and you can see, as you would expect, the ALP ministers are here. You've got the leader of the opposition here, and the deputies spending both more than Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan did, which seems odd, but there you go. And it sort of peters on down here under $600,000 and all the way down. And as you may have noticed, I did mention here before that some people do claim out of time periods. So, for example, Bob Brown is not a member at this point, but he is in the data set because he did claim at that point. So comparing this to the current Parliament, so let me just pick the current Parliament. So we see the roles are now reversed, understandably, with a parliamentary majority on the lower house. You expect the Liberal Party to do a bit more, but they're significantly more than the ALP than what it was previously. This is the total cost. We see here the average values here. We've got the Liberals and the Nats, $650,000 for the 18 months, and the Greens and Labor are about the same, and all the minor parties and associated independents are much less than that. Here we've got the average cost again by party. We see that, funnily enough, the overseas travel is flipped, although not probably to the same extent that it was with Bob Carr. This is again just an average. This is an average by member. Travelling allowances, sort of the charters again, the Nationals stand out. Office admin, they're all spending quite highly, as you would expect on an advertising slush fund-ish sort of thing. This is the total cost again, and you can see here now the total cost of the overseas travel, almost $8 million compared to $800,000 for the ALP. Travelling, there's a bit of a difference everywhere here, and particularly in terms of advertising as well too, and car costs. But let's just go to the worst. So as you would expect, Tony Abbott hitting the top there, and his deputy Julie Bishop behind. Andrew Robb, the Trade Minister, behind that, and then Barnaby Joyce, the now leader of the Nationals, coming in number 4, with Bill Shorten and Tanya Plibersek sort of falling down in the middle here, and the rest here are Liberal Party ministers. And Bob Katter jumps up here to get just over $1 million for the 18 months. We go down here, drops down below 600,000 again. And then, as I'm sure many people will be happy, we have quite a lot of the independent senators down here at the bottom, not spending a huge amount. So in terms of average expenditure, they're doing a lot better than some of their party-aligned colleagues. So I mentioned before that the Nationals were good at charter. I suspected it was because... Where are we? Back here. Total cost. Average cost. Yes. You see, there's a difference there, but they've got much less members, of course. It's because of their rural locations, obviously the National Party being the party of the country. So I went and selected a whole bunch of rural MPs. Warren Snowden from the NT, I picked a couple from Western Queensland and one in WA, to sort of give an idea about how other rural members would spend their money. Well, sorry, particularly charters. And we have, in terms of this is Warren Snowden, that's Bob Catter, I believe. And you see they actually, if we go to totals is the best one to do. Individuals, yeah, that'll do. So in terms of flying around, it's not that other parties with rural members both also do spend a lot. Just they might be averaged out in the long term, whereas the Nationals, on average, are country members. So that's that. I would also like to show you so the independent senators. I'm sure a lot of people are jumping up and down to see how these guys are going. So I've got them all here together. Let me just clear that month out. I've got this month is the... Here we go. Those 2 months are the only 2 months where we have all of them together. If I select all months, obviously Nick Xenophon was the only independent senator at that time in Parliament. So it mucks up the averages if I include that. So let's just... There's no real difference between his current values and his previous values, so I'll just include the 2 most recent months, so any totals and averages make more sense. So you can see here that Ricky Muir spends the least. I'm sure a lot of people are happy about that. Nick Xenophon's sort of second best there in terms of spending, and the other ones sort of spend about the same amount. In terms of individuals, let me just get to that. So they all sort of travel a bit. None of them have gone overseas, which is probably fair enough. In terms of flying around, flying from WA and from Tasmania, maybe the worst of them, I'm not sure, but you make your own decision about that. Nick Xenophon's had a little bit of a charter here and there. There's some car costs. Ricky Muir's not spent a lot on advertising, but sort of Jackie Lambie and Dio Wang and Glenn Lazarus spent a bit of money. So has David Leonhelm. And there's been some family travel, but nothing hugely major compared to everyone else. If we just go to who's the worst all up over that yearly period there, we sort of see what we saw before. So if we do the same thing but we go to MPs, so I've included the Greens MPs alongside all the independent MPs here just for illustrative purposes, really. If we go forward, the month-on-month ones at party aren't particularly interesting because there are different numbers and different members in those 2 periods. Obviously Rob Oakeshott and Tony Windsor in the previous Parliament, and Clive Palmer in the current one alongside Cathy McGowan. So I've got Adam Bant and Andrew Wilkie and of course Bob Catter. They're the ones that are there for all of the time periods there. So let me just... I've mucked myself up here, apologise for that. So if I do individuals and I just pick the previous Parliament here, you can sort of see that Bob Catter, being a somewhat rural Queensland area, does have to fly a lot and has a bit of cars. In terms of office facilities and office admin, you can see here that Adam Bant from the Greens has spent a lot of money in that period. As I say, I think it's a kind of a requirement from the party that you allocate some money to your party to help out with advertising, so that's why these figures are so high and continue to be high. And if I go forward to the current Parliament reporting, so we swap out Rob Oakeshott and Tony Windsor for Cathy McGowan and Clive Palmer. Clive hasn't done a huge amount. We've still got Bobcat is sort of dominating most of the travel-related stuff, and Adam Bant sort of still spending a fair amount, but not as much as it was before, with both of them sort of quite high. In regards to that, I do have a tab called Worst, so let me just pop over. I'll just pick the current Parliament, and I will pick Office Admin and Office Facilities. So you can see here that literally the average cost per member is over $200,000 for an 18-month period. So that seems ridiculous to me for people who are getting paid much less than that, and just being on advertising and trying to keep their jobs. If I go through to this here, so you'll see this is just obviously the worst again. So Scott Morrison has spent almost $800,000 in the past 18 months on office admin and office facilities. And you can see here that there are people here you wouldn't necessarily know who they are. Who's Tony Payson? Who's Joe Ludwig? Well, I know who Joe Ludwig is, but anyway. Luke Hartsuker, who's he? I mean, these aren't people who are minister. Well, Luke Hartsuker might be a minister, but it does seem to be an extraordinary amount of expenditure for what it's claimed to be. And I mean, it's not even, if we go sort of... sorry, that was my phone. If we go sort of the halfway mark here, the median is still between $300,000 and $350,000 for 18 months. And of course, luckily, we've got all the independent centres down here. So again, I'll say again, they are one of the lowest spenders overall. So I think that's the main thing I wanted to cover from you with you today. Thank you for listening so far. What I would also like to go through, I've got the current Parliament here, yes. I have 3 sort of other visualisations I like to cover. So this is just a delta visualisation, so that the size of the boxes relates to the values shown here. And so you can see that just the overall totals of expenditure in this 18-month period, the Liberal Party is over half of that total value. And for comparison's sake, let's go to the previous Parliament, apply selections. So it's almost flipped. It's a little bit different, but it's almost flipped. But of course that's probably due to different numbers of members in there. So anyway, let's just go to the current Parliament. So that's overall. So this is now by individuals. So you can see here Tony Abbott at the top and Julie Bishop. This is the same as my worst graph that was there previously. Except it's now got names and little boxes, and you can kind of get a bit of an idea what's going on there. We'll just swap to the previous Parliament for comparison. So my final one is by claim type and then by party, and you can actually see here that literally this office facilities and office admin costs that they've claimed back on us, they're over half of the total expenditures that they've claimed back. I mean, car costs and flying around are almost a quarter, not even a quarter, perhaps about a quarter or so, but even things like overseas travel, which you think might be it would be a lot more as pittance compared to these office costs. And we'll just go back to the previous Parliament for comparison. So the colours swap over, which is a big surprise, but the categories stay the same. Current Parliament, please. So I showed you before the Bronwyn Bishop's PDF. I have got the PDF data pulled out. However, it is a little bit rubbish. I had some issues with some of the formatting and that sort of thing. So if you were particularly eager to go point a finger at somebody, you could look for them here. I picked before Gary Gray because he's no longer standing. And that literally, so these 3 PDFs, if you wanted to pick one of the PDFs, so this should be most of what is in that PDF. As I say, please check the actual ones, just click on the link there, it'll take you to it. This is most of what should be there. I am aware that there is some things missing. That's due to my coding, I apologise about that, but that's the way it goes. Finally, the final page I have here, there is one more cost I haven't added into all of my other graphs, and this is an office fit-out cost. So this is any costs relating to the initial setup of a parliamentary office, or any changes that require to the building, any security things that are needed, or if, say, what did happen around Bronwyn Bishop's time was that I think Tim Wyatt mentioned that he had costs here because he had to move his office because of boundary changes. It moved outside of his electorate, so he had to move his office back into his electorate, which obviously meant leasing a new building or so on and so forth. So the values are here. They do blow out some of the totals and make them look a bit funny. So I thought it was good to pull them out, given they're essentially one-off costs. The one that people do like to point out to me is Barnaby Joyce. So obviously being, if I just pull this out here, so he's had a few of these. Obviously moving from the Senate to the lower house in Armidale here, he's had to change offices a few times, and indeed I think he's got 2 offices in Armidale because the electorate's quite big. So he's been had a go at for that, but anyway. So what I'd like to say is that if you want to ask me any questions, get any data, that please let me know on the Reddit or on the comments. I'll try and respond as soon as I can. I'll have other details relating to this there as well too. After this, I will go through some of the categories very slowly, so if you want a particular number, I'll be able to get it to you without you having to ask me one simple question and having to wait a day for me to get back to you. But otherwise, I hope you found this interesting, and thank you for watching. So before I go, I'd like to say thank you to everyone out there who campaigns for freedom of information and freedom of data. Without freedom of data and freedom of information, I wouldn't have this information to show you. So always, always, always ask questions if people don't want things to be out in the open, because they're probably trying to hide things. And always look out for the people who are trying to make things more open and more free, because they're the ones who will reveal things like Bronwyn Bishop's helicopter trips and that sort of thing. I will make this available to people to log on. You'll need to register with Click itself, your email address. So if you've got a throwaway email address or something like that, you'll find information. I'll link it to on the Reddit to get access to this. And thank you very much. Cheers.